start the recording here. So we have made it to our last class. You can believe it. The semester is rapidly coming to a close. So what I'm going to do is I'll show you guys Canvas, what we have going on, what you have coming up. Then we'll do a little attendance quiz. Then I had gotten some questions about the endocrine system, so I'll go through that, and then we'll do our activity. Okay, so again, for those of you just coming in, please make sure your name is in the chat so I have a record when I download the recording here. Let me just go. Okay, so as you can see here, give me 1 second, let me just get myself situated. So we are all the way down here in module 7. We're in our endocrine system. As a reminder, this is a brief module because we only have this 1 week. And so there is a guided reading quiz, guided reading questions due on tomorrow evening, 1 GRQ. And then we've got what we'll work on today. You'll submit that. And then the homework is also due tonight. And that's just to give me time to grade those before next week for those people who are taking the test on Monday. So as a reminder, the final is in class. It is for Monday for people who have the last name A through K, and on Wednesday for people who have the last name of L through Z, starting at 9:05 in our room, Health Science Center 259. It is 12 short answer questions. Please bring a pencil with an eraser and some extra lead. This will be like on a legit piece of paper. Well, several pieces of paper, but it's a paper test. So you're gonna need the things you need to take a paper test, like something to write with, okay? It is cumulative. It is slightly weighted towards module 7, so you'll see more than one question about the endocrine system just because there is no quiz for this module, okay? So again, it's in class. It is short answer questions, 50 minutes, paper, all that good stuff. And then you'll have a little bit of time until the final project is due, so your poster presentation. So again, that is on the 18th. That's when our class is scheduled for that 2-hour block during finals week. Instead, we are going to have on Zoom, I'll send out the link for that, a Zoom poster presentation, what you guys have been working on with your groups, right? So you have at this point turned in your abstracts, so you have all of your research done, you have a good idea of what you're going to say. You're going to put that together, and then we'll go alphabetically, and you'll take a turn. When it's your group's turn, someone from your group will share their screen and give a little bit of information about that poster that you guys have been working on. If you look in here, again, your poster, it explains what should be included with your poster, how many PowerPoint slides. Again, very short, and you'll take about 5 to 7 minutes. This is the rubric, so I'll make sure you answer each of these questions again that we've gone over. You stick to that length, again, 5 to 7 minutes, that you give a good presentation for that. So make sure you discuss with your group at least ahead of time who's gonna share their screen, who will talk first, who will talk second, so you have a little bit of an organization there because I will be looking for that. Okay, so we're now in our last class, class 13. If you want to open up that class 13 agenda for your class 13 attendance quiz, if you guys want to tell me, what are 2 hormones that are made in the pancreas? What are 2 hormones made in the pancreas? You guys take a minute and do that. What are 2 hormones made in the pancreas? Okay. And while you guys answer that quiz, I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint I had put together about some of the questions that have come up about the endocrine system, and we'll talk about that. So again, what are the 2 hormones made by the pancreas? Okay. So again, we're at the end of our material for the class. The class covers chapters 1 through 9 in the textbook, and we've reached the endocrine system. And the endocrine system is a system that's pretty unique in that it has a bunch of glands that are not connected to each other. So when we think of all of our other systems, we think about things that are pretty connected, right? So our nervous system, we've got a brain connected to a spinal cord connecting to those peripheral neurons. When we think about our muscles, they're all kind of together and connected, and our bones are connected at joints. Our skin forms a continuous unit. But the endocrine system, these glands are kind of spread out throughout your body, and they work to help control and coordinate the activities of the body. And they work with the nervous system. The nervous system is our speedy reactor because of that electrical chemical signaling. It works really fast, whereas the endocrine system is slow because what the endocrine system does is it has glands secrete a hormone, which is a chemical, into the bloodstream, into circulation, and they'll move throughout their body and they'll affect a specific target organ. And the only organs that they'll affect, what makes a target organ, is that it has a receptor for that hormone. It has a way to respond to that hormone. Okay, so because the endocrine system is kind of big, there are a lot of glands in the body, and a lot of them affect processes that we haven't talked about in this class. So, for example, you have a whole bunch of reproductive hormones that affect your reproductive system, but I'm going to leave that for A and P2 because we haven't talked about the reproductive system. There are hormones that affect your heart. We haven't talked about the cardiac system, so I'm just going to kind of push those to the side, and we're going to focus just on two glands. So we're going to focus on our adrenal gland and talk just about the effect the adrenal gland has on stress, and we're going to talk about our pancreas and how it helps us control blood sugar. So the first question I got was about the adrenal glands. So the adrenal glands sit on top of your kidneys, and they have two main areas. They've got an outer cortex and an inner medulla. And the cortex is made of typical glandular tissue, and the medulla is nervous tissue. So it's got that electrical impulse thing going on. And each layer of the adrenal cortex makes a different class of hormones. And we're only going to talk about the outer two. We'll talk about mineralocorticoid secreting area, which makes aldosterone, and glucocorticoids, which make things like cortisol. So this picture I got from the book, and you could see that I have kind of mutilated it a little bit, altered it, because a lot of the information that they gave, we're just not going to talk about. So I don't need you to stress out about it. So I put these little very, very clever boxes. I know it doesn't look like it, but I altered the figure. Okay, so let's first think about what will trigger aldosterone secretion or our mineralocorticoid secretion directly. So that is mainly going to be a decrease in sodium in your blood. And the main instance when this happens is when you get dehydrated. So you think you just put in a hard workout, maybe you went for a run outside and you didn't bring any water or Gatorade or anything, and you sweat a lot, right? And you're sweating out those electrolytes. You're losing sodium in your blood. That is going to directly stimulate the adrenal gland to make and release aldosterone. And what aldosterone will do is it'll go to the kidneys and it'll say, hey, kidneys, we are dehydrated. We don't have enough salt in our blood. This is a problem. Can you, instead of peeing out all of the salt, can you like save some of it for the blood, please? And the kidney will be like, yeah, sure, not a problem. And it will increase the reabsorption of that sodium from the urine into the blood. So rather than peeing out salt, we're going to save some of it, and it will increase our blood concentration of sodium. And the interesting thing to know is that water is going to follow the salt. So salt is going to go back into our blood, water will go back into our blood. And in this way, we're going to have an increase in blood volume. We now have more blood, right? And if you think about, if you have a house and you have a hose, and you just turn on the hose a little bit, we're going to have some water going through the hose, but it's not going to have a lot of water pressure, right? But if you turn the hose on a lot, you're going to really increase the volume of water, and you're going to increase the pressure of water through the hose. The same is true with your blood. You increase the volume of blood a little bit, you're going to start to increase the blood pressure. So that's the downside of aldosterone. It does the good thing that you want. It increases the salt in your blood, and it increases that blood volume, which you might need if you've lost some blood. But it also increases blood pressure. Now, this same pathway turns on in times of stress. So stress tells our hypothalamus, and remember the hypothalamus, right, in the brain. Stress is going to tell the hypothalamus to release corticotropin releasing hormone, which will tell our anterior pituitary to release a hormone called ACTH. And ACTH will tell the adrenal gland to do this process, release aldosterone, increase salt, increase water, increase blood pressure. This is why everyone says when you get really stressed out, you got to watch your blood pressure. You got to think about your blood pressure, calm down, because stress is going to increase BP through this pathway, okay? So long-term stress is what we're talking about here. And what I mean when I say long-term stress? This is kind of like what you're living through right now, right? Finals week, it's a global pandemic. There's a lot of uncertainty in the environment, right? Maybe you've got work stress, you've got family stress. These are long-term stressors. And when your body is in this phase, you are in the resistance phase of stress. You're dealing with a long-term stress. And so your hypothalamus is doing this pathway involving the anterior pituitary, the release of ACTH. And the ACTH not only causes the adrenal gland to release aldosterone, which does that sodium, blood volume, blood pressure thing, but it also causes the adrenal gland to release another class of hormones called glucocorticoids. And this is like cortisol. You can think of that hydrocortisone cream you put on if you get like a rash, right? Is a good thing in a little bit. You want a little bit of cortisol because what it does when you're putting it on a cream, right, it's going to suppress the immune system. So you're not going to get as itchy or as swollen. But in your body, that for a long time is bad because it will turn proteins and fats into glucose. So you'll have high blood sugar and it will suppress your immune system, right? So this is why when you're stressed for a long time, you're more likely to get sick. Now, this is different from a short-term stress or an alarm phase stress. And the short-term stress is what we've already talked about with our sympathetic nervous system, right? You see a bear. What happens when you see a bear? You're going to enter that fight or flight response. And that's, again, triggered by your hypothalamus, which will send a nerve impulse. And it will do what we talked about with the sympathetic nervous system, directly connected to our heart and our lungs, having those effects. But sometimes when you see a bear, you need to do something for more than like 30 seconds, right? Your sympathetic nervous system directly affecting target organs is a very short response. And sometimes you need a little bit more energy to get away from that bear. And this is where your adrenal gland comes into play. Because your hypothalamus will signal to the nervous tissue of your adrenal medulla, and it will cause it to release a class of hormones called catecholamines. And the main one here is epinephrine, also known as adrenaline. So everyone's heard of, oh, my adrenaline was flowing, right? So that sympathetic nervous system will quickly act on the target organs, but also allow the release of adrenaline or epinephrine, which will signal that same effect for a slightly longer period of time, right? So we're talking a few minutes here, as opposed to just like 30 seconds of quick fight or flight. And it's going to do that fight or flight stuff, that epinephrine, that adrenaline. Increase your heart rate, increase your BP, increase your blood sugar, dilate your bronchioles, right? Make you more alert. All of the things you need to do to either fight the bear or run away from it. So again, we have the alarm phase. We're thinking epinephrine. We're thinking that fight or flight response. In the resistance phase, now we're talking about aldosterone and cortisol and these long-term effects. Okay. Finally, we're going to talk about our pancreas. So that was the stress component. Now let's talk about blood sugar. And we want to think about what happens when our blood sugar is off of what it should be. So this is, again, we have homeostasis in our body. We have a set point we want to maintain. And for blood glucose levels, that's about 90 mg per 100 mils. That's the ideal amount of blood sugar. And we have these hormones that are negatively regulated. Everyone think back to negative feedback, right? So they're going to initiate a change, and when the levels return to baseline, that will then turn off the system. So if we have high blood sugar, say we just had, I don't know, a pumpkin donut for breakfast, which sounds like really good right now. I might in fact get one after class. We eat a pumpkin donut, right? Our pancreas is going to say, oh my gosh, we have way too much sugar in our blood. It's going to release insulin, which will do two things. It will tell the cells in your body to take up some of that glucose and remove it from the blood. And it will also tell the liver to store the glucose in a long chain called glycogen. And this will remove sugar from the blood and the blood glucose will fall. And when it falls back to 90, the insulin secretion will be turned off. It will be negatively fed back and it will turn off. Now, say it's been a while. You ate that pumpkin donut. Do you then feel guilty for eating a pumpkin donut? So you said, I'm just going to skip lunch because I had a giant donut for breakfast. Well, your blood glucose is then going to start to fall below the 90. And so your pancreas will be like, this is also a problem. And it will release a hormone called glucagon, which will tell your liver to turn the glycogen into glucose. And your blood glucose will rise back up to normal. Now, I apologize for this system. We have 3 words that all look very similar and all mean different things. So please do not mix up glucose, which is blood sugar, glycogen, which are the storage polymers of glucose in your liver, and glucagon, which is the hormone released by your liver. Okay, so with that, those were the questions that I had received in advance. Do I have any other questions that you guys have about that system? Okay.
No, that was a pretty good one.
Yeah, ma'am.
Okay. If you think of it, let me know. I know I talk fast, but luckily this is recorded so you can watch it back and slow me down. So what we're gonna do next is, let me share my screen here again, is we're gonna do one last activity. So I'm gonna put you guys into 5 groups, and similar to what we did for the bones, you guys are gonna make a little slide answering one of these 5 questions. So if you click on that Google Doc, it brings you here. I'll put you in a group and you're gonna, on your slide, here's the question. Put your names on the top so when I look at it, I know who is working with whom, and then bold the name of the person who's gonna do the talking. That's always the trick. And so you want to put some text and then find a picture to answer the questions. How do hormones work? How are hormones stimulated? How does our body deal with short-term versus long-term stress? How does our body maintain blood glucose homeostasis? And what is diabetes? Okay, so those are the questions you're going to answer again on that Google Doc. Let me put you guys into 5 breakout rooms, and then I will go through and remind you what question you're working on. Okay, rooms are open, go into that, and then I'll pop in. Esperanza and Bria, you guys okay?
Yes, ma'am. My computer's just moving a little slow this morning.
It's a Friday, I understand. Okay.
Chris?
Okay.
Okay.
You guys are answering question 1.
Okay.
Okay.
Any
Cool.
questions?
Thank you. No, I think we good.
Okay, I'll leave you to it.
All right. Thank you.
Let me come in and tell that.
Okay, you guys are doing question 2. Any questions?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, you guys are doing question 3. Any questions about that? You guys good?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, you guys are doing question 4. You guys good?
Yes, ma'am.
I'll leave you to it. Okay, you guys are doing question 5.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, welcome back, guys. So let me share my screen here. Okay, so again, I had you guys make these little visuals for what I think are the key questions to understand from this chapter. Okay, so again, key things to understand. You need to understand these things. So let's start with group 1. Kalani, do you want to unmute yourself and tell us how hormones work?
Okay, so hormones is a chemical that's released by cells or glands in a certain part of the body, and they send out messages that end up affecting other cells in other parts of the body. And then small amounts of small amounts of hormones are required after cell metabolism. So it's a chemical messenger that transport a signal from one cell to another. So we have our hormones and receptors, G proteins, enzymes, and second messenger. And so first, the hormones bind to the receptors, which activate the G proteins, and then the G proteins are activates the I'm sorry, these words are hard. Adrenalate cyclase.
Cyclase.
Okay. And then that converts ATP to CAMP, which is our second messenger. And then our CAMP activates our protein kinases.
Exactly. So great job. So again, hormones made in a gland, they're going to move throughout the body. And then we have two different types of signaling that can happen. If it's a steroid hormone, remember the chemistry of our plasma membrane is such that the fat, the steroid, is just going to slip right on through, and it will bind to a receptor that's usually in the nucleus, and will directly affect the transcription of key genes. Whereas protein and peptide hormones, as Kalani nicely explained, are going to use this second messenger system because they're going to bind to a receptor on the cell membrane. Exactly. Great job. Okay, Bria, do you want to tell us about how hormones are stimulated?
Sure. So, we have 3 ways in our body that hormones are stimulated. And the first and most common is hormonal stimuli. And basically, that is when a stimulus or a hormone is made, and that signals to the body that another hormone should be made. And when that hormone doesn't need to be made anymore, it creates a negative feedback in the body, which tells the body to stop and it's good. So it doesn't need any more of that hormone release. The second is humoral stimuli. And basically that is stimulated by changing blood levels. And within the blood levels, we have different ions. So when a certain ion is low, that tells the body that it needs a hormone to be made. Neural stimuli is when the nervous system tells the body to make a certain hormone.
Great. Awesome job. And even though we're only covering 2 glands, we actually are covering an example from each of these 3 categories, right? So if we think about hormonal stimuli, as Bria nicely explained, we're going to have a hormone that will cause the release of another hormone, which can cause the release of another hormone. That's what we see happening in times of long-term stress that eventually results in the release of aldosterone, right? So we've got the hypothalamus to the anterior pituitary, which will release ACTH, which will tell the adrenal gland to release aldosterone, right? So that's sort of hormonal stimuli. We have a few different examples for humoral stimuli, which is levels in the blood. It can be ions, it can also be nutrients. So aldosterone can be released as well if the level of sodium drops. Remember that? We can also release hormones in the pancreas based on the level of the blood for glucose, for example. So humor doesn't mean like laughter. In the old anatomy terminology, humor is blood, so it's the fluid. And then finally, we talked about neural stimuli with the release of catecholamines, with the release of that epinephrine, otherwise known as adrenaline, right? That's triggered by the sympathetic nervous system. Awesome job. Okay, Esperanza, do you want to tell us about short-term versus long-term stress?
Yeah, I can do that. So to start, a short-term stress response on the body, they can include like increased heart rates, increased blood pressure, and increased how do you say that, metabolic rates. For example, this includes like the fight or flight response. And then for the long-term response on the body, it can include retention of sodium and water by the kidneys, increased blood volume and blood pressure, and proteins and fats can also be converted into glucose or broken down for energy.
Great job. Yeah, so exactly. We talked about this. The alarm phase is that short-term stress response. This is where we're seeing epinephrine get involved, or adrenaline. In the long-term phase, the resistance phase, this is where we're using our adrenal gland to release aldosterone and cortisol, which are going to have some pretty serious long-term effects on the body. Great job. Okay. Evan, do you want to tell us about how our body maintains blood glucose? Evan Z?
All right, hold on, give me a second right here.
Okay.
All right, I just need to relocate myself right quick.
Okay.
There's a lot over here, but it mainly the insulin and the glucagon is the main two hormone that will maintain the glucose level in our blood.
Great.
And this what is it? When the glucose level rises, is will trigger the well. It's easier just to look at the picture over here. I am struggling really bad. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I'll take over for you, Evan. You did a good job, and we talked about this already, right? So again, we want to maintain the homeostasis of our blood glucose. We want to maintain that set point at around 90 mg per 100 ml. Blood glucose rises, insulin is going to tell our body to use it up and to bring it back down. And then if it falls too low, glucagon will tell our liver to release some of its stores. And again, the key here is not to mix up blood glucose, glucagon, the hormone, and glycogen, which is the store of glucose. Good job. Okay, last group. Tiana, do you want to tell us about diabetes?
Sure. So for diabetes, it's a condition whenever the body doesn't properly process food for use as energy. And also if you have too much sugar in the blood, it results in high blood glucose. Okay, and as you guys see, is National Diabetes Month. And we also included a picture in our slide that shows like somebody that's healthy and then somebody that has type 1 and type 2 diabetes. There's two different types. Type 1 is a chronic condition when the pancreas produces little to no insulin, and then type 2 is a chronic condition that affects the way the body processes blood sugar. And then we also included the insulin intake thingy that they use. Well, not intake thing that they use, but so they prick their finger and then like they put their blood on the stick, and that shows them their isn't it? It's with their blood glucose level.
Levels. Exactly.
Yeah.
So great job. So diabetes is a chronic condition. There are two main types. As Tiana explained, type 1 is typically diagnosed in kids. And this is where the body just for some reason doesn't make enough insulin. And so you're going to just have chronically high blood sugar. These are the kids that normally get those insulin pumps so that they can have that artificial extra insulin just directly added into their body when they need it. Type 2 is a more commonly diagnosed in older folks, and it's that your body is making insulin, but you've become resistant to it. So your cells are not responding to insulin the way that they should, in large part due to chronically high blood sugar levels. Okay, so if you look back on our agenda, let me pull that up. Great job, guys. We were going to watch this video about diabetes, and I was going to have you submit notes as your class 13 assignment, but I'm not going to do that because we're pretty much out of time. So for your class 13 assignment, if you could submit a screenshot or even just the number of the question that you guys worked on for your group, that will be your last class 13 assignment. What slide did you work on? That will be that. And we've reached the end of class. We've reached the end of the material. So again, next week, based on your last name, the Monday group, the Wednesday group, 9:05, bring pencils. And then we'll do that final poster presentation, and then we're done. So I wanted to thank you guys for being flexible this semester. I know hybrid learning has not been easy on anyone, but I really appreciate you guys having that flexibility and that understanding to just kind of go with the flow and figure it out together. So thank you for that. I hope you guys enjoy your weekend and you take some time for yourself, and you guys are good to go.